For decades, audiences have watched him play intimidating hitmen, powerful Jedi, superheroes, coaches, detectives, villains and leaders. But before the fame, before the awards, and long before Hollywood knew his name, Samuel was simply a boy growing up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, in a family that was far removed from the glamour of show business. And here's where his story gets interesting. The man who would become one of Hollywood's biggest stars was raised largely by a hardworking mother and his maternal grandparents, while his father struggled with alcoholism and lived apart from the family. Samuel also had no brothers or sisters. He was an only child. So how did this unusual family structure shape the man who would eventually become Jules Winfield, Mace Windu and Nick Fury? Let's take a closer look at the people behind the legend. His parents. Samuel Leroy Jackson was born on December 21, 1948, in Washington, D.C. His parents were Elizabeth Harriett Montgomery and Roy Henry Jackson. Unlike many Hollywood stars who grow up around entertainment, Samuel's family had no major connection to the film industry. His parents were ordinary working people. His mother worked hard to provide for her son, while his father struggled with personal problems that made his presence in Samuel's childhood much more limited. That family background is important because it shows just how far Samuel eventually traveled. His journey from a working-class childhood to international movie stardom was not a continuation of a family tradition. It was something he built himself. His mother. If there was one person who stood at the center of Samuel's childhood, it was his mother. Elizabeth Harriett Montgomery was a hard-working woman who spent much of her life supporting her only child. She worked at a factory and later worked as a supplies buyer at a psychiatric institution. Her working life was very different from the world her son would eventually enter. She wasn't walking movie premieres. She wasn't signing Hollywood contracts. She wasn't surrounded by celebrities. She was working, and that work helped provide Samuel with the opportunity to grow, attend school and eventually pursue higher education. That is one of the quiet truths behind many great success stories. The star may stand on the stage, but somebody often worked behind the scenes to help him get there. For Samuel, that person was largely his mother. A mother who wanted her son to have an education. Education was important in Samuel's family. His mother wanted him to have opportunities that could help him build a better future. Samuel attended Riverside High School in Chattanooga before going on to Morehouse College in Atlanta. At the time, nobody knew that he would eventually become one of the world's most recognizable actors. In fact, Samuel initially had different ambitions. He studied marine biology at Morehouse before becoming increasingly involved in theater. But the foundation for that journey was created much earlier. His mother helped give him the stability to pursue education. And eventually, education opened the door to another world. Theater. His father. Samuel's father was Roy Henry Jackson. His relationship with his father was complicated. Roy struggled with alcoholism, and he was largely absent from Samuel's day-to-day childhood. He lived separately from the family for much of Samuel's upbringing. This meant Samuel did not experience the kind of constant father-son relationship that many children have. Instead, his mother and maternal grandparents became the dominant family influences in his childhood. The absence of his father was undoubtedly part of Samuel's early family experience. But it is also important not to reduce his entire childhood to his father's struggles. Samuel had other people around him who provided care, structure and support. And those people became incredibly important. His maternal grandparents, the people who helped raise him. Because Elizabeth had to work, Samuel was largely raised with significant help from his maternal grandparents. They became an important part of his childhood environment. For a young Samuel, they represented family stability. They were there during his formative years. They helped provide the day-to-day support that his mother, because of her work responsibilities, could not always provide herself. So when people talk about the family that shaped Samuel L. Jackson, it isn't enough to mention only his parents. His maternal grandparents were part of that story too. They helped create the environment in which he grew up. And sometimes, the people who quietly raise a child become the invisible foundation of the adult that child eventually becomes. Samuel was an only child. Now here's a detail that many fans may not know. Samuel L. Jackson was an only child. He did not grow up with a brother. He did not grow up with a sister. There were no siblings sharing the family spotlight. His immediate family circle consisted primarily of his mother, his father, and his maternal grandparents. Being an only child can create a very different childhood experience. There is no older sibling to imitate, no younger sibling to protect, no brother or sister competing for attention. Instead, Samuel's relationship with the adults around him became particularly important. And his mother and grandparents played a major role in that environment. Growing up in Chattanooga, although Samuel was born in Washington, D.C., he was raised primarily in Chattanooga, Tennessee. That is where much of his childhood story unfolded. Chattanooga was a long way from Hollywood. And the America Samuel experienced as a young black boy was dramatically different from the America he would later inhabit as a wealthy international celebrity. He grew up during the civil rights era. The country was undergoing enormous social change. Racial segregation, discrimination and the struggle for equality were major realities of American life. Those circumstances helped shape Samuel's understanding of the world. And later, he became involved in activism while attending Morehouse College. The family and the civil rights era. Samuel's childhood took place during a historic period. The civil rights movement was challenging racial discrimination across the United States. As a young black man growing up in Tennessee, Samuel was exposed to the realities of that era. When he reached Morehouse College, his interest in activism became more pronounced. He participated in protests and became involved in efforts connected to social change. At one point, his activism contributed to his suspension from Morehouse. But he eventually returned and completed his education. This part of his story is important because it demonstrates that Samuel's confidence did not suddenly appear when he became a movie star. He had been developing his voice for years. Long before he became famous for speaking unforgettable lines on screen, he was learning to use his voice in real life. The family's financial reality. Samuel's family was not wealthy. His mother's working life reflected the realities of a working-class household. She had to earn a living while helping raise her son. His grandparents also played an important role in supporting him. There were no Hollywood agents waiting outside the front door. No family connections to major studios. No inherited entertainment empire. Samuel's future depended heavily on his own choices. That makes what happened later even more impressive. The road to Morehouse College. Samuel eventually attended Morehouse College, a historically black college in Atlanta. His original academic focus was marine biology. That fact alone is fascinating. Imagine if Samuel had stayed on that path. There might never have been a Jules Winfield. No Mace Windu. No Nick Fury. No Samuel L. Jackson movie universe. But while studying at Morehouse, Samuel became involved in theater. And acting began to pull him in. The stage offered something he hadn't expected. A place where his personality, voice and presence could become strengths. Eventually, he changed direction. The scientist disappeared. The actor was born. How his family influenced his career. Samuel's family did not create his acting career directly, but they helped shape the qualities that allowed him to build it. His mother demonstrated hard work. His grandparents provided stability. His father's struggles exposed him to the destructive consequences of addiction. And his upbringing taught him resilience. Those lessons became increasingly important as Samuel entered adulthood. Because becoming an actor was not easy. And becoming a successful actor was even harder. The family's struggles would follow him into adulthood. One of the most important chapters of Samuel's life was his own battle with addiction. During the early part of his acting career, he struggled with drug addiction. Eventually, the problem became serious enough that he entered rehabilitation in 1991. That decision became a turning point. Samuel got sober. And shortly afterward, he delivered one of the performances that helped change his career. He played Gator Purify in Spike Lee's Jungle Fever. His performance was deeply powerful because it reflected a subject he understood personally. And he received international recognition at the Cannes Film Festival for the role. His life was beginning to move in a completely different direction. From family struggle to Hollywood success. Samuel's journey after rehabilitation was extraordinary. Within a few years, he would become one of the most recognizable actors in the world. Then came Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction. Samuel played Jules Winfield. The movie transformed his career. Suddenly, the actor who had spent years struggling to establish himself was everywhere. And eventually came Star Wars. Then Marvel. Then blockbuster after blockbuster. But none of that changes where the story started. It started with a working mother, a complicated father, supportive grandparents, and an only child trying to find his way. The family he created. Samuel eventually built his own family. He married actress LaTonya Richardson in 1980. They have one daughter, Zoe Jackson. And their relationship has endured through decades of Hollywood pressure. That is especially significant because Samuel's own childhood had been complicated by the absence of his father. As an adult, he created a different kind of family environment for his own daughter. His marriage to LaTonya became one of the longest-lasting relationships among major Hollywood couples. A family of entertainers. Interestingly, Samuel's daughter Zoe also entered the entertainment industry. She has worked as a producer and director. And LaTonya has had her own successful career in acting and theater. So although Samuel did not inherit a Hollywood dynasty, he eventually helped create one. The family that once had no major entertainment connection became connected to the industry through multiple generations. That's quite a transformation. What makes his family story so powerful? Samuel L. Jackson's family story isn't powerful because everything was perfect. It's powerful because it wasn't. There was hardship. There was separation. There was addiction. There were financial pressures. There were difficult choices. But there was also determination. There was education. There was family support. And there was the willingness to keep moving forward. That combination helped shape Samuel into the man audiences eventually came to know. The woman behind the man. When Samuel talks about his journey, it's impossible to overlook the importance of the people who supported him before he became famous. His mother worked hard. His grandparents helped raise him. His wife stood beside him through difficult periods. And his family became part of the foundation beneath his extraordinary career. Hollywood may have eventually given Samuel millions of fans. But his earliest audience was much smaller. It was his family, the legacy of his parents. Samuel L. Jackson's parents never became Hollywood stars. But their influence can still be seen in the man he became. His mother's work ethic, his grandparents' support, the lessons he learned from his father's struggles. All of these experiences became part of his personal story. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson. You don't have to come from greatness to create greatness. Sometimes you come from ordinary circumstances. Sometimes your family struggles. Sometimes your path looks uncertain. But with determination, your story can become extraordinary. Today, Samuel L. Jackson is known around the world. His name appears in blockbuster credits. His voice is instantly recognizable. His characters have become part of pop culture. But strip away the Hollywood fame, the expensive suits and the movie premieres, and the story becomes much simpler. A boy, an only child, a hard-working mother, a complicated father, grandparents who helped raise him, and a young man who eventually discovered that his greatest gift was not marine biology. It was storytelling. His family didn't hand him Hollywood. They gave him a foundation. And Samuel took that foundation and built an empire. From Chattanooga to Hollywood. From a working-class childhood to global superstardom. From personal struggles to an extraordinary comeback. Samuel L. Jackson's story proves that sometimes the most powerful Hollywood stories begin far away from the spotlight. And behind every unforgettable star is a family story that deserves to be remembered.